Today, we remember and honor the men and women who died in our country's uniform and those they left behind. Brothers, sisters, husbands and wives, sons and daughters, heroes, whose families and loved ones paid the ultimate price. That's why it is my pleasure to introduce fellow United States Army veteran and fellow anti-war activist Bill Jefferson to begin our program today with a moment of silence.
Thank you for coming. Today, we celebrate Memorial Day. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember why we're here and to remember those who cannot be. It's Memorial Day. It never goes away. I don't see pretty grass and flowers with miniature flags, but the horror of combat and unbearable losses. I opposed the Vietnam War before, during, and after being drafted. At age 20, I didn't want to kill. Nobody could explain to me the reason why I had to. That attitude was not popular. I did a lot of my suffering in solitude. Like Graham Platner, when I came home, I took on hard healing work. And after, with other veterans, I organized to oppose endless wars. But I'm nearly 80. I want to share the responsibility to fight back against yet another war and those getting rich off them. I know Graham Platner will share that responsibility. Graham was asked recently what to do about the Trump administration dismantling the VA. He said he would work to ensure that there are no more suffering veterans. What an idea. From my generation of veterans who didn't hear this, welcome home, young warriors. Now, join Graham as he takes up the fight. And we're coming for you, Susan Collins. And thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Kelly Brennan. Kelly has been a registered nurse for 17 years, specializing in neurosurgery and trauma. She currently works at Maine Medical Center, just up the hill there. She is co-president of Maine State Nurses Association and a member of National Nurses United. Kelly.
Good evening, Portland. I'd like to take a moment and thank Senator Bernie Sanders for inviting us all here tonight to support these two incredible candidates, Graham Platner and Troy Jackson. My name is Kelly Brennan, and I've been a nurse for 17 years, and I'm the newly elected co-president of Maine State Nurses Association. And I'm a proud member of National Nurses United, the largest and fastest growing union of registered nurses in the country. National Nurses United is proud to lend our full support to future Senator Graham Platner and future Governor Troy Jackson. Nurses and healthcare workers are on the front lines of Trump's fascist agenda. Our patients, our hospitals, and the communities we work in have all been targeted by ICE. And I know we are all deadly serious about protecting our society from falling off an authoritarian cliff into the abyss of feudalism, oligarchy, abject servitude, and the post-democratic dystopian hellscape that Donald Trump and his band of nitwit Nazi dweebs want to impose on all of us. And guess what? Us nurses, we don't consent to that. We will do everything in our power to fight and take back our democracy from the no-good, greedy hands of the billionaire class. Trump and the Republicans have gutted healthcare programs like Medicaid, all to send tax breaks to his billionaire buddies and fund ICE terror. And currently, the Republican-led Congress is attempting to send an additional $70 billion to fund ICE. And listen, that is way more than a slap in the face. That is a sick reward for the lawless murder of fellow nurse Alex Preddy. And yet, at the same damn time, more than 600 hospitals nationwide, major and rural hospitals here in Maine, are on an immediate risk of shutting their doors for good due to the reductions in Medicaid funding. And as the rich get richer, our patients and our communities suffer. They face medical and student loan debt, housing insecurity, inability to retire, and decreased life expectancies. And now, ICE agents turning our own neighborhoods into war zones. And make no mistake, this is exactly the world that Trump and his billionaire buddies want to make. But nurses and all of us here tonight, we know better, and we are not going to let that happen. This isn't about the right versus the left. This is about the haves versus the have-nots, the billionaires versus the working class. And healthcare capitalism has no place in a world of healing. No one should be profiting off another person's illness or injury. And as a bedside nurse, I am so sick and tired of having to apologize to my patients and their families on behalf of health insurance executives. Healthcare is a human right, and Medicare for all is the answer. Nurses are, first and foremost, humanitarians. And we believe our world can be a place where everyone is treated with compassion and dignity. Nurses have a vision for a healthy society, one where everyone has the right to health, the right to a good education, the right to safe and affordable housing, the right to a unionized living wage job, the right to live safely and peacefully, the right to a healthy planet, and the right to enjoy the beauty of life and more. And having representatives in Congress and in the state legislature who are committed to fighting for the worker class is the only way to combat this threat against our communities. Graham Platner and Troy Jackson are those representatives. Graham Platner will fight to turn off the endless stream of funds to weapons manufacturers and ICE violence, and instead invest in caring for our communities. No more endless wars. And Troy Jackson, he knows working people deserve better here in Maine. Protecting worker rights, our immigrant communities, and holding billionaires accountable is what keeps us safe. So show up and vote, and then show up and organize. Because when we build a new society and a true healthcare system in the ashes of the old, we will be a stronger, more humane, and a more caring society than ever before. And you better believe, us nurses, we will be there every step of the way. Because unlike Robert Kennedy Jr., we actually know what it means to make America healthy again. Love and solidarity, my friends, that's what really matters. And now I'd like to introduce to you the person behind the scenes, Spencer Toth, organizing director for Graham Platner's campaign. Thank you.
What's up, Portland? My name is Spencer. I'm the organizing director on Graham Platner's campaign. I'm from Bangor, and I just have one quick question for you all. Susan Collins has been my senator my entire life. Who here is ready to change that? Okay, so everyone who just clapped, I need you to pull out your phone right now. Let me see them. Yep. All right, awesome. I need everyone to please go to graham4senate.com/support. That's graham4senate.com/support. Click that volunteer button. You got it? Oh, she's on it. Okay, good. Wherever you are from, whether you drove down from Aroostook County, up from York County, or if you're from Portland, there is a team of people ready to welcome you, to train you, and to help get out the vote. We are just 16 days away from the election, and we need to turn the energy of this rally into a revolution talking to our neighbors. So again, that's graham4senate.com/support, and please make some noise and welcome to the stage, Troy Jackson.
So you ready to get this party started? Well, good evening, brothers and sisters. It's truly an honor to be here with you tonight in Portland and share the stage with some truly incredible people and great friends. As you heard, my name is Troy Jackson. I'm a fifth-generation logger from Allagash. Former president of the Maine Senate, and a card-carrying union member. And I tell you, I'm running for governor because the status quo doesn't work for Mainers. And I've watched power and influence hold back the people, the communities that I've cared about my entire life. So you see, when I was young, my father used to take me with him to work in the woods from time to time. And I still remember one time when he took me on a strike at a place called the Highland. And, you know, I was just a young feller. And I didn't understand wealth inequality or power dynamics. I just saw 90 or so men that were blowing off steam, waiting for the landowner to come. They weren't even asking for a raise. They were just asking to hold on to what little they were being paid for a really dangerous job. But when the large landowner showed up, my first billionaire, a guy by the name of Jim Irvin, he didn't try to calm the situation or anything. He just got out of the car and he said, if you don't go back to work for what I'm paying you, he said, I'm going to replace you all tomorrow with Canadians. You know, and in my area, that's a huge deal. Because Canadians are great people. I mean, that's where my ancestry comes from. But because of the exchange rate, national health care, subsidized equipment, they've always been able to work in our industry for less. And we've been used against each other my whole life. So as an 11-year-old, I'd never seen anything like that. You know, first all those men got angry and desperate, and when they realized that it was hopeless, they just got quiet. The landowner won, and that was it. And I could see in the face of my father the desperation that comes from having your dignity stolen. And ever since then, my father had told me that he did not want me to go to work in the woods. He didn't want that life for me. But I was an idiot. And at first, things were okay. But when we started to have kids, it became really challenging. You know, I had to chase jobs all around Maine. And then in 1998, everything really came to a head for me. The exchange rate went to 55 cents on the dollar, and loggers couldn't find work right in our own backyard as corporations broke the law hiring Canadians. So a group of us got together, and we spent months trying to get the attention of politicians like Governor King, Senator Olympia Snow, and Senator Susan Collins. But they had no interest. So 100 of us had one final meeting in Fort Kent, and after a while, a man named Hilton Hafford stood up and he said, look, I'm done with this. He said, I'm going to the border Monday morning to stage a protest. How many of you are with me? And everyone in the room got excited. Everyone said yes. But I remember thinking, no one's going to show up. I've seen this play out before, and I'm not going to go. And days later, around 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon, the phone rang, and it was Hilton. And he said, Troy, he said, we're going to go to the border tomorrow morning. Are you with us? And as we talked, I remember thinking, Troy, you're 29 years old. You're separated from your wife and your kids. You're living with your mother. And you're working yourself to the bone, and you still can't make ends meet. Something has to change. And somewhere in that conversation, it just clicked for me. And I said, yeah, Hilton, I'll go. And when I got off the phone, you know, my mother was standing there. She asked me, well, what's going on? And I explained it to her, and she said, well, she didn't want me to go. She told me that they were going to make an example of me, that I'd struggle to find work, that I might get arrested, maybe even get hurt. And I knew that, like always, my mother was right. But I told her the truth that, you know, Mother, if I don't go, I'm not going to be able to live with myself. So the next morning, I got up at 2 a.m., drove the 65 miles in the woods to the Quebec border at St. Palmfield. And you remember those 100 men that had volunteered to come? Well, only 15 showed up. And I remember thinking, well, this is depressing. But I figured 15 is better than 1. So we parked our pickups across the road and blocked the border. You know, we weren't letting any workers in, and we weren't letting any wood out. And around 9 a.m. that day, we got the word from Customs that miraculously, all of a sudden, Governor King and Collins wanted to meet with us in Augusta. And we said no. If you want to talk, you can meet us up here at the border. So by the end of the week, we had blocked 3 borders with only 15 people. And we finally got a chance to meet with those politicians on the weekend. And they told us that they didn't know what was going on. They hadn't heard that we needed a cooling off period. And we told them, just enforce the damn law. And when we returned to the border on Monday morning, the landowners had us arrested. I was marched out of the woods, and the billionaire landowners thought that they had won. But I was just getting started. You know, growing up, I always thought, I was told that the government works for those people that played by the rules. But government only works for power and influence, the power of people that can write the biggest checks. So I ran for office to change that. And I won. And I learned fast that that same power that I felt in the woods was alive and well in Augusta. Lobbyists could walk into any office and kill a bill that I had built a coalition for and that working people needed. So I kept fighting. I ran for Senate. I built a majority. And as Senate President, we made universal school meals free. We invested in child care, health care, housing. And just 2 weeks ago, it came out because we passed paid family medical leave. But whenever the bills, my bills, threatened the status quo, well, they were vetoed. Collective bargaining, banning the spraying of Roundup from helicopters, capping prescription drug costs, all those things were vetoed. I actually hold the record, 100 bills vetoed. That's the most in the history of Maine. Power and influence think that they can stop progress. They think that they can hold us down. But they can't. I'm running for governor because we're going to pass those goddamn bills, and we're going... And you know what else? When we pass them, we're going to enforce them, which is another thing that never happens in this state. Because we're going to have a government that works for us and not just for them. Because the billionaires are going to be fine. They've always been fine, and they always will be fine. That's not who I'm worried about. I'm fighting for us, because you're my only special interest. You know, this is a hard point sometimes to get across, but honestly, I'm running for governor because we've been robbed by so many things in this world by the people who control it. But there's never been any greater robbery than that of our time. It's something that we can never get back. You know, the time that we have with our parents, our children, and our loved ones is limited. It's finite. You know, last night I had the great fortune to have my mother, my father, my stepfather, one son, and his partner who's here tonight somewhere, Chess. And I got the chance to talk about how, you know, we're going to have our first grandchild with her. And how much it would mean for me to be able to spend time with my granddaughter, the time that I never had to spend with my kids. That is the time that we have to fulfill our dreams, live up to our goals, and bring about the change that we know that Mainers deserve, that is slipping away before us. Because what little time we have is being stolen by an oligarchy who see our lives, who see us as nothing more than a commodity, something to monetize. We can't afford to wait any longer. I say our time is now. So tonight, I'm asking for your support on June 9. I'm asking you to place your faith and your trust in the fifth-generation logger from Allagash, who spent his entire life trying to build a state worthy of the people who call it home. Because this isn't a campaign, it's a movement. And together, we're going to win the Blaine House, and we're going to win the Senate with Graham Platner. Right here in Maine, we're going to remind the world that the Democratic Party is the party of the working class, and we're damn well going to fight for it for a change. Together, we will stand up to Donald Trump and his sycophants in D.C. We will fight back against corruption, power, and greed. We will take back our time, and we will take back our lives. Look, we are not from the left, we are not from the right, we're from the bottom, and we are rising. We are rising, and finally, for the first time in my life, we are going to win. We are going to take back this country. We're going to do the things that are right for us because we matter. And there's more of us out there than there are of them, and we're going to take this country back and make it a place that we want. Absolutely. Okay, so look, solidarity is not just a word. It's a lifestyle. It's something that we have to do. We have to do coming up June 9th and then later on November. And I tell you, politics is a blood sport. And for too long, the Republicans have been playing it better than we have. So now we have someone who understands how to fight back, someone that gets it, someone that actually cares about us. With that person, it's my honor to introduce your next United States Senator, Graham Platner.
Come on, you good workers, good news to you out town. Oh, how the good old union has come in here to clear. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? My daddy was a miner, and I'm a miner's son. And I stick with the union till every battle won. Which side are you on? Which side?
Portland, you never disappoint. Good evening. It's great to see all of you here. Honestly, this is utterly spectacular. I want to say thank you very much to Troy. Troy, thank you for your words and for your years of service to the state of Maine. Much like Senator Sanders, Troy Jackson has been a steadfast champion of the working class for decades. When far too many politicians' affinity for working class people can be swayed by political winds, or when their dedication to standing up for working folks wavers with polling data or with political contributions, Troy Jackson has stood firm. A logger from Allagash with a single-minded focus on improving the lives of working Mainers. And that's why I was proud to rank Troy #1 when I voted, along with ranking Shenna Bellows and Hannah Pingree for governor. I would also like to thank Kelly, who is an absolute powerhouse of organizing. The Maine State Nurses Association embodies solidarity every single day, fighting not only for workers but also for patients. That's what they'll be doing this week when they go on strike in Holton. Demanding safe staffing ratios in the wake of hospital up there closing its labor and delivery unit. To MSNA and NNOC, myself, everyone here tonight, and all working people in the state of Maine are in solidarity with you in this fight. Thank you. So the last time, well, before last night, I shared a stage with Senator Sanders. It was here in Portland, 13 days after we had launched this campaign. It felt surreal then, and to tell you the truth, it still feels as surreal today. Until 9 months ago, I truly thought that being the harbor master of Sullivan, Maine was going to be the extent of my political future. Today, I am deeply humbled to say that together, we have built a movement. But that is not a testament to me. That is a testament to this country, to this state, and to all of you. Thank you. Now, I'm a son of rural Maine. I'm the 9-year-old raking blueberries in the July sun. I'm the teenager who got kicked out of boarding school because my resentment of institutional power existed long before a politics that matched it. I'm the 21-year-old in Ramadi, serving my country next to my fellow Marines. I'm the young man who came back with the weight of the forever wars and the alienation and the darkness that came with it. But I am also the man who found my way home. Found my way to making a living on the sea, found my way to community, and found my way to love. This state raised me, and this state saved me. And let me tell you, I love the state of Maine. Now, Senator Sanders asked a question in his 2020 presidential run. Are you willing to fight for somebody you don't know as much as you are willing to fight for yourself? If this campaign is any indication, the answer in Maine is a resounding yes. As we have crisscrossed the state these last 9 months under the snowfall in Madawaska, at shift change at the mill, as the sun rises down east or as it sets in Rangeley, at the boat launch steps from my front door, or in a school gymnasium 200 miles away, I have heard from Mainers. I have heard from seniors scared that future generations will never have the same opportunities they had to buy a home in the place that they live and love, to send their kids to well-funded public schools, who are watching in horror as their grandchildren have to hold on so tight with the fear that if they don't, everything will be ripped away. And I've heard from students who fear not only for themselves, but for their parents and their grandparents, the people who gave them everything and whose Social Security checks get smaller each month as everything else gets more expensive. I've heard from fishermen who, with all the challenges they face, are concerned about how tariffs are impacting their neighbors who are contractors. Or I've heard from loggers who fear for the nurses and the teachers in their communities who seem to never be paid what we know they are owed. Here in Maine, we are ready to fight as hard for the people we do not know as we are for the ones that we do. It is who we are, and it is who we will always be. This movement, our movement, is not divided by age or by class or by gender or by race. It's not divided by where you live in Maine or for how long. This is a movement of Maine, by Maine, and for Maine. And we are going to take back what is ours. Because for decades, they have taken, piece by piece, store by store, hospital by hospital, home by home, they have taken. They took so much, they began to think that we didn't exist at all. But they don't know Maine. They don't know the power that we have here, and we are taking back what is ours. We're going to take it back from the corporations that seek profit no matter the cost, from the billionaires for whom greed is the point, and from corrupt politicians like Susan Collins, corrupt politicians who have sold us out. Now, there's a word I want to use to describe what we are fighting. But I've heard from the pundits and from the media that people like us don't know what it means. So before I use it, I just want to make sure. Can you raise your hand if you know what the word oligarchy means? That's what I thought. We know the word because we feel the consequences of it every day in our bones. We will not just fight the oligarchy, we will defeat the oligarchy. And we are going to defeat the political system that it maintains. It is a system that is the politics of Susan Collins, a politics that turns politicians into millionaires, but tells you to be grateful for crumbs. It is a lie. It is a lie intended to serve the billionaire class. It is the lie we are told that we have to choose between clean water or affordable health care. It is the lie that there is always money for forever wars, but never money for our schools. There is always money to blow up someone else's children, and never enough to feed our own. It is the lie that we have to look on helplessly as our hospitals close while health insurance CEOs and billionaires line their pockets with our blood, sweat, and tears. And it is a lie that we are powerless to change the world around us. I am running because I refuse to let their lies dictate our reality any longer. I am running because it is time for change. I believe that in our country, the voices of working people are far more important than the voices of those who merely have money. I believe that we should not be settling for scraps that they throw to us from the table where they are dining with the Epstein class. I don't think that a CEO should have more power than a union member. I don't think that private equity deserves more time with a United States senator than someone who works 2 jobs for a living. We are in the straits we are today because that is exactly what has happened. But the world that we live in today is not how it has to be. We can have a healthcare system that is not just another mechanism of extracting wealth out of working Americans, but a guarantee of safety and health for all of us. Major life events like buying a home or getting a college education can be points of joy and pride instead of a relegation to a lifetime of debt. Our tax dollars can build schools and hospitals in America instead of bombs to drop on them in Gaza and Iran. We can take back the wealth that belongs to us, that has been stolen by corrupt politicians and the corporations that bought them. We can use the government to usher in a golden age of unions and workers, not double down on gig work and union busting for the benefit of Wall Street or for CEOs. We can use the power of government to look out for the most vulnerable, for children and the elderly, where we lift each other up, whether we are starting a business or starting a family or going to college or buying a home, where we empower workers to fight for fair pay and safe conditions, where we reap the profits of our hard work. We can have an economy and a government that works for the 99% and not just the 1%. But we are not going to get any of this with speeches alone or with any politician alone. No one is coming to save us. We need one thing, something the man speaking after me has been fighting for 60 years. We need a political revolution. It is thousands of people across Maine, millions across America, acting together, creating a movement too powerful for money to buy. It is all of us doing what Spencer just asked us to do. It is taking precious time out of our weeks, week after week, and doing something that isn't complicated, but is hard. Talking to our neighbors, at their doors, overcoming our differences and bringing them into our fight. Because this is the fight of our lives. Now, I would like to end this speech the same way I did those many months ago when I first had the honor of joining Senator Sanders on stage. When we beat back fascism, when we defend our democracy and our freedom, let it be a different kind of freedom. Not merely a romantic freedom, not a freedom that's solely about the defense of an infringement on our rights, but a freedom that is material. A freedom to not be condemned to scraps and struggle, but to live with the dignity and fulfillment that gives us the society that we deserve, where instead of dreaming of a life where we can get by, we can afford a life that allows us to dream. That is the vision. This is the opportunity before us. We will win the primary. And we will win the general. And we will show this whole country the way forward, because as Maine goes, so goes the nation. Thank you all very much. You may as well say standing, because now it is my absolute honor to welcome to this stage a man who needs no introduction, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Portland. Let me thank Thank you. Thank you. You know, it is hard to follow people like Troy and Graham. And you all know that the future of our country depends right here on Maine. You elect Graham Platner as senator, you're going to transform America. And elect Troy Jackson as your next governor, you're going to transform this state. Let me thank Weekend Friends for the music, Adam Gardner, John Fishman, the Pete Kilpatrick Band for their music. Let me thank Bill Jefferson, not only for his service to our country in Vietnam, but for standing up and making sure that young Americans don't get killed in wars that should never be fought. And let me thank Kelly Brennan with the National Nurses United, a great union, a union that understands that health care is a human right, not a privilege. Tonight is, I believe, our 41st Fight Oligarchy event. And we have done these events from California right here to Maine. We've done it from Michigan in the north to Texas in the south and a whole lot of states in between. And these rallies altogether brought out more than 300,000 Americans. They brought out progressives, they brought out Democrats, they brought out independents, they brought out Republicans. And what I can tell you without any hesitation is the American people will not accept Trump's authoritarianism. We will not accept oligarchy. We will not accept kleptocracy and corruption. We will not accept the continued attacks against the working class of this country. And we sure in hell will not support U.S. tax dollars supporting endless and horrific wars in Gaza, in Iran, in Lebanon, or any place else. One of the things that we don't see in the establishment media, we don't hear in the halls of Congress, is something very basic. And that is the reality of the working class in America. What's going on? And everybody in this room knows what is going on. And that is, while the very richest people in this country have never ever had it so good, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to put food on the table, pay for health care, education, and other basic necessities. I grew up in a family, like many of you, that lived paycheck to paycheck. I grew up in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And I know what lack of money did to my family, the stress that it brought to my parents. And we were not poor. And right now, all over this country, you got moms and dads worried about how they're going to feed their kids, how they're going to pay their rent. What happens if the kid gets sick and you can't afford to go to the doctor? What happens if mom has a stroke and you can't afford prescription drugs? What happens if your kid has a dream of going to college, but you can't come up with $80,000 a year to send him or her to college? And people, every part of our country, here in Portland, in Vermont, all over this country, are dealing with that stress. And that stress is killing us. Here's a fact we don't talk about very much. We don't talk about it very much. As it happens, our life expectancy, how long we live as a people, is about 3 or 4 years shorter than people in other wealthy countries. That's bad. What's even worse is if you are working class in this country, you're going to live 7 years shorter lives than the wealthy. In other words, the struggles that our people are going every single day, waking up. How do I survive? What happens if I lose my job? What happens if somebody gets sick? All of that stress, literally, impacts the physiology of people's bodies and their mental health as well. Now, the billionaires and the corporate media and the folks in Congress are going to tell you that's the way it is. You can't do any better than that. Well, we're here to say loudly and clearly we disagree. We're here to say that we can do a hell of a lot better than that we can create an economy that works for all of us, not just the billionaire class. And I want to talk about the failures of the current rigged economic system. Health care is something that every person in this room, every person in Maine and in Vermont and around this country needs. We're all going to need health care. Today in America, despite spending over $15,000 per capita a year on health care, we have 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. We spend twice as much as other countries. Tens of millions are uninsured or underinsured. And you know what that means? It means that some 60,000 Americans die each year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. Does anybody here think that the American healthcare system is working? Well, we're going to take on the insurance companies. We're going to take on the drug companies. And we're going to do, with Graham in the Senate, what every other major country on earth does: guarantee health care to all people through a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, we're told by Fox TV and everybody else, this is a far-left idea. It's a radical idea. We're too stupid and incompetent to do what every other major country on earth does. I was just in Italy, as it happens, last week, a much poorer country than the United States. You go to a hospital in Italy, you know what the bill is when you come out? It's zero. Canada, it's zero. If every other major country on earth can do it, the United States of America can do it as well. How are we doing on housing? Everybody here in Portland have great housing at an affordable cost? Well, nobody in Burlington, Vermont does either. And all over this country, what we're seeing is people paying 40, 50% of their limited incomes on housing. We got 800,000 Americans who are homeless today. So here's a radical far-left idea. Instead of spending $1.5 trillion on the military, as Trump wants, how about spending a few $1 billion to start building low-income and affordable housing? It is not acceptable to me, that young couples today are purchasing their first home at the age of 40. In 1991, it was 28. I want young people to know that when they start a family, they're going to be able to buy their own home at a young age. So we talked about health care, we're talking about housing. Now, what about education? Every psychologist in the world understands that the most important years of human development are 0 through 4, right? Emotionally, intellectually. I hear my colleagues in Washington, oh, they love America. They are there in front of a big American flag talking about how patriotic and how much they love America. If you love America, you love the children of America. This is the richest country in the history of the world. United Nations does a study. They look at all of the major countries on earth in terms of how they treat their children and in terms of the child poverty levels. Well, the good news is that the United States is not in last place. The bad news is that of 36 countries, we rank 35th, ahead of Uruguay. Richest country on earth has almost the highest childhood poverty rate of any major country on earth. And today, because of the nature of our economy, where it takes a mom and a dad both to go out and work in a working class family, one might think that we would have a state-of-the-art child care system. A system that would be affordable, having well-paid, well-trained workers doing enormously important work. But I don't have to tell anybody here that our current child care system is broken and it is dysfunctional. I don't have to tell anybody here that we have teachers in Maine, teachers in Vermont, and all over this country who are working at salaries far, far below what they deserve. In the richest country on earth, it is not a radical or far-left idea to say that we should have the best public educational system in the world, from childcare to graduate school. We are living, as all of you know, in a competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. It is insane to say to young people, you're going to have to go $100,000 in debt to get a college degree. It is insane to say to young people at a time when we need doctors and nurses that you're going to have to go hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to get those degrees. It is not a far-left radical idea to say that we must make public colleges and universities tuition-free. It is not a radical idea to say that we should treat our parents and our grandparents with the dignity and respect that they deserved, having helped build this country. The older generation created the economy, they fought in our wars. And yet today, despite all that they have done, 1 in 3 older Americans are economically insecure. In America today, over 20% of seniors are trying to survive on $15,000 a year or less. It is not a radical idea to say that we have got to significantly expand Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income. So, brothers and sisters, my point is that you're living in the richest country in the history of the world, and what the ruling class wants us to believe is this is the best that we can do. We have to have our seniors living in poverty, our children living in poverty, kids not being able to go to college, the only major nation not to guarantee health care to all people, not addressing the crisis of climate change. That's what they want us to believe. But what this campaign is about, and what we're doing all over this country, is telling the billionaire class, enough is enough. That we are going to roll up our sleeves and create a very different and better America, an America that works for us, not just them. Now, talk a little about what's going on for our people. Let me talk about what's going on for them, people on top. And the simple reality is, never before in the history of this country have so few people had so much wealth and so much power. You know, all of us were in school, and when we were in school, we learned about the Gilded Age. Remember that? The age of Rockefeller and Carnegie and Astor and Vanderbilt and all these zillionaires. They were very rich and very powerful. Nothing compared to what exists today. Today in America, unbelievable. You're not going to hear it much in the corporate media, and you're not going to hear it much from the halls of Congress. But we have an unprecedentedly unfair distribution of wealth and income. Today, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. And if you think that is crazy, you got an economy today where one man, Mr. Musk, owns more wealth himself than the bottom 53% of American households. What more do we have to say about the economy? How insane is that one man owns more wealth than the bottom 53%? The CEOs of large corporations today making 350 times what the average worker in that company is making. But when we think about the economy, it's not just the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Today, we have more concentration of ownership than we have ever had. You know what that means? It means that in sector after sector, whether it's agriculture, transportation, energy, artificial intelligence, financial services, you name it, you got a handful of giant corporations controlling that sector and through monopolistic practices charging us far more for the products they make than they should. And when we talk about concentration of ownership, it is important to take a hard look at the media. All right? Now, why is media important? It's not because, as Donald Trump says, oh, it's fake news. He has a story, somebody exposes one of the things he's doing, it's fake news, all the reporters are lying all the time. That's not it at all. What it is that what media does is shape the kind of issues that we think about. They determine what is important and what is not important. And what we have right now are 6 major media conglomerates who control about 90% of what the American people see, hear, and read. Got it? 6. It is not an accident, trust me. It is not an accident that Elon Musk owns Twitter, that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post and Twitch, that Mark Zuckerberg owns Meta, which includes Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and Threads. Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post. Larry Ellison owns CBS, TikTok, Paramount Pictures, Skydance, MTV, and is on his way to acquiring CNN. Bottom line there is not that what appears on television is a lie. It's that you have got to go into your own hearts and say, wait a minute, that may be important, but it's not the most important issue. We have got to determine what the most important issues are. But when we talk about the economy, it is not just income and wealth inequality, as bad as it is. It's not just concentration of ownership, as bad as it is. Let me tell you what's even worse. This billionaire class, not content with owning and controlling the economy, they now want to control our political system and undermine American democracy. You know, we in New England have a tradition of town meetings, and I love that. And I really love it. In my deepest part of my being, I love democracy. I love democracy because if you disagree with me, come on up here and say it. Think you could be a better senator? That's great. Let's debate the issues. Let's think about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. Let's talk about it. That's a beautiful system. You know, in the town meetings, people are arguing about how much they're going to spend on the roads or on the schools. That's what democracy is about. One person, one vote. But what you got now is not only Trump and his authoritarianism undermining democracy, you got the billionaire class and their super PACs working every day to undermine democracy. What democracy is supposed to be about, I know this sounds like an arcane, very old-fashioned idea. It's supposed to be a debate about ideas, right? What's your views on the issue? What do you think we should do on healthcare? What should we do on education? That ain't democracy anymore. What's going on right now in our very corrupt campaign finance system, and believe me, you're going to see that right here in Maine, is you're seeing billionaires and their super PACs as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. You're going to see billionaires spending unbelievable amounts of money to destroy candidates like Graham and progressive candidates all over this country. So what I would urge the people of Maine to do, and the people of every state in this country to do, when you see those ads on television over and over again, ask yourself a few questions. Who's paying for those ads? And the answer is it will be billionaires. Maybe it'll come from AI. Maybe it'll come from crypto. Maybe it'll come from AIPAC. Maybe it'll come from the military-industrial complex. It'll come from some very powerful and wealthy special interest. And then ask yourself, why are they doing? Why do they want to beat Graham Platner? And the answer is obvious. Graham stands for the working class and is prepared to take these guys on. And Graham understands that it's not good enough to talk about overturning Citizens United, which of course we have got to do. What we can and do right now is pass legislation to get super PACs out of the political process. I want the day to come when young people who feel the bent, who want to do it, want to run for public office. I want them to run for public office without having to beg wealthy people and billionaires for campaign contributions. And there's one more issue that I know that Graham and Troy understand very well, is that right now the wealthiest people in the world, people like Musk and Bezos and Ellison and Zuckerberg and others, are now spending hundreds of billions of dollars to push artificial intelligence and robotics on the people of this country. And if anybody thinks that these greedy multi-billionaires care one damn about the future of the working people of this country, you would be terribly mistaken. They are in it because they can become even richer and more powerful than they are right now. There are economists out there who tell us that in the next 10 years, tens of millions of jobs in this country can be destroyed. There are psychologists out there who worry about the mental health of our kids who form emotional attachments to AI robots. There are scientists out there who worry that if AI becomes smarter than human beings, and my wife tells me that is a very low bar, but if and when that happens, and it's no longer science fiction, and I'm talking about Nobel Prize winners in physics talking about this, that AI can break away from human control, become independent of human control with possibly cataclysmic implications. That's all in front of us. And what all of these guys are saying is, we don't want any regulation. Doesn't matter how many millions of jobs we destroy, what we do to our democracy, what we do to the mental health of the people of our country. Leave us alone. We don't want to be regulated. But what Graham understands and Troy understands, we are not going to let a handful of billionaires control the future of this country. We're going to... We're going to make certain that AI and robotics works for working people, not just the billionaires who own that technology. Let me conclude just by saying this. What the ruling class of this country does in so many ways is not just exploit workers, not only gets tax breaks that they shouldn't have, not only takes us into wars that we should not be fighting, they do something even more insidious. And that is they try to tell the American people that we are powerless. Their message is, we have all the power. We own the media. We own the Congress. We own the economy. You got nothing. And I'll give you one example of that arrogance. Right now, in California, in New York, there are unions and other people who are demanding that the wealthy and the billionaires start paying their fair share of taxes. Now, what's interesting is what the billionaires are not saying. In California, what they're trying to do is impose a one-time tax on billionaires so that millions of people in that state don't lose their health care, don't lose nutrition benefits, and so forth and so on. And you know what the billionaires are saying? They're not debating their issue. They're not saying, well, it's more important that I not pay my fair share of taxes. I don't care if children go hungry or lack health care. That's not what they're talking about. You know what they're saying? If you dare to tax us, you know what we're going to do? We're going to leave the state. In other words, heads I win, tails you lose. You can't beat us. We got the power. You want us to pay taxes? Well, we're going to throw you out of work and move to another state. That is the arrogance of the billionaire class right now. And I want to give you an example. We live in a country where the effective tax rates of billionaires is lower than it is for truck drivers or nurses. And that is why I introduced legislation, which Graham will be by my side in fighting for, which says that we are going to impose a 5% annual wealth tax on the 938 billionaires in America. Now, I want to take a moment, allow me to take a moment just to give you an example, one example of what the massive level of income and wealth inequality in America is about. Stay with me. If that 5% tax on fewer than 1,000 billionaires were to go into effect tomorrow, this is what it would mean. It would mean that every man, woman, and child in America living in a household of less than $150,000, that's most Americans, every man, woman, and child would get a $3,000 check. If we pass that tax, it would tackle the housing crisis by providing the resources necessary to build 7 million units of low-income and affordable housing. If we pass that legislation, it would expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. If we pass that legislation, it would bring about universal child care in America. If we pass that legislation, no teacher in our country would be earning less than $60,000 a year. If we pass that legislation, we would restore health care to the 15 million people that Trump threw off of their health care. And here is the irony. You do all of that and more by a 5% annual tax on fewer than 1,000 billionaires. And I know that many of you are worried about what this would do to the billionaires. Oh my God, would they be forced to go on welfare? Would they be forced to sell one of their private islands? Would they be forced not to take their spaceships as joyrides? So I want to reassure you, because I know you're worried about them. So let me give you an example. If this tax were to be passed, Elon Musk would pay $39 billion more in taxes, but it would leave him with just $737 billion to try to survive. I know, hey, look, you know what the price of gas is now? You know, the price of housing, guys, only left with $737 billion for Bernie's confiscatory and radical tax on poor Elon. Jeff Bezos, would owe about $14 billion more, and he would really be in trouble. I mean, he would learn what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, getting down to mere $265 billion in wealth. The point that I'm making is these guys have so much wealth, and they're using their wealth to create more and more power for themselves, to make sure that the Congress does not stand up to them. But beginning to take them on can transform this country from top to bottom. As I think you heard from Troy and Graham, what we need to do is not just elect these guys. And I want to tell you something else, is that all over this country, we are seeing people understand that establishment politics and same old economic policies are no longer good enough. I want to tell you, just as some of you know, 6 months or so ago, a friend of mine in New York City, he started his campaign at 1% in the polls. He took on the Democratic establishment, he took on the Republican establishment, he took on the President of the United States, he took on the oligarchs of New York City, and that gentleman, Zohran Mamdani, is now mayor of New York. A good friend of mine, Analilia Mejia from New Jersey, started her campaign for Congress. Virtually nobody knew who she was. She ran a strong grassroots campaign, She is now a congresswoman from New Jersey. An iron worker from Ohio took on the establishment, and he won a landslide victory a few weeks ago in the Democratic primary. All over this country, working people, including Republicans, understand that the economy is rigged, that the campaign finance system is corrupt, that in fact we need a political revolution. And what Mamdani did in New York City is put together a grassroots coalition of 100,000 volunteers. He did that in the most urban part of America, largest city in this country. You in Maine now have the opportunity to show the world that we could do the same thing in one of the most rural states in this country. Don't let anybody tell you we can't do it. Yeah, they got the money. They got the money, they got the power, but we've got the people. And when we don't allow Trump to divide us up by where we were born or the color of our skin or our sexual orientation, when we come together as one people, we can take on the oligarchs, we can beat them, and we can create the nation that works for all of us, not just the few. Thank you very much.